I love you. I'm never gonna let anyone replace you. You don't. Come in. Well, this is awkward. Some of you may know that Awkward Guests is my favorite pure deduction game, so I was a little bit nervous when Scandal O knocked on my door. I was afraid they'd be a bit of an awkward guest, but I'm here to tell you, they fit right in. Scandal O is Megacorp Games' newest Kickstarter release, the publishers behind one of my very favorite games, Awkward Guests. You may notice an immediate difference right off the bat, and that is, yes, this is a much more vibrant game than Awkward Guests. The color brown is very prevalent here, but the game is choice. How does Scandal O compare? First and foremost, I want to tell you that this box is a prototype box. These are all prototype materials, and that is what I have played with and what I've been working with. But that's not important. Let's talk about how the game plays, what makes it different, better, or worse than Awkward Guests. For those who aren't familiar with either of these games, let me briefly introduce you to them. These are a pure deduction game using what's referred to as the Brilliant Deck system. It's a system using numbered cards that in the back of the rulebook or on the app tells you which cards to pull out for each scenario. In Awkward Guests, there's hundreds of scenarios. In Scandal O, I'm not sure of the number, but I imagine it's at least the same. You pull these cards out, create a deck that is unique to that very own game. Some range from intermediate to very hard to super easy, trying to get you worked into the deduction, how it works, and then throwing you into the deep end. Throughout the game, you're going to be drawing cards from the deck, jotting down information on your sheet, attempting to solve the puzzle and figure out, in Scandal O's case, what scandal happened, what celebrity was behind the scandal, and what newspaper wants to publish that story. You're drawing cards, scratching out information on your sheet, narrowing down the possibilities for the scandal. You're then inquiring with other players, sharing information, exchanging cards, getting an insight into what information they already know, while also letting them get some more information. Throughout the game, you're going to continue that cycle, sharing information with people around the table, drawing new cards from the deck, until eventually someone decides that they want to solve the case. In Scandal O's case, they want to know what scandal took place, what celebrity did it, and what newspaper is publishing that story. The first thing that crossed my mind when I opened up Scandal O was, how is this going to be different than Awkward Guests? And I'm pleased to say, it's not that different. That's a positive. I love Awkward Guests, and it's kind of hard to get a hold of. So the fact that they're releasing Scandal O that you can pledge for and get on Kickstarter is a positive all around. The game is not the same. There are differences. But overall, they still have a very similar feel, and I think if you've been longing to get Awkward Guests, Scandal O is totally a good option to go with as well. Scandal O is, in my opinion, and of course I have played Awkward Guests more than Scandal O, but Scandal O is, in my opinion, the more abstract version of the game, and I'll explain what I mean when I say that. It's not abstract in the sense that there's no theme or like chess or Azul or anything like that. It's not that at all, but Awkward Guests is a familiar story, right? We've played Clue. We understand the puzzle of solving the murderer. Who was able to get to the knife? Who was able to get the knife to the guy that died? So on and so forth. Scandal O is just slightly more abstract in that the theme is a little bit weirder and less straightforward, or at least in my case, less familiar. In Scandal O, I'm not as used to it, and it does make it a little more difficult to comprehend. Now, I picked this game up pretty easily. I looked at the rulebooks for about 5 minutes, jumped into it, and within 10 minutes, we were up and rolling. It's one of those things that I'm familiar enough with Awkward Guests that this was very easy to get into. There were a couple minor things in Scandal O that gave me pause. Just had to check out the rulebook for those specific things, and I understood it clearly. I think it works just as well as Awkward Guests. The big question is, which do you need? Do you need both? Or what should you go for? In my opinion, if you already have Awkward Guests, and you haven't explored everything it has to offer, or at least a vast multitude, and you're still okay with the lack of color and the theme, keep playing Awkward Guests. If you want the new theme and the new, more pretty, colorful version, get Scandal O. It's just as great as Awkward Guests. Now, if you're just trying to decide which one to get, ultimately, I'm gonna say it comes down to theme. Do you want the theme of trying to solve the murder, or do you want the theme of trying to figure out what scandal has happened and report it? Now, availability is also a concern. Scandal O is going to be readily available on Kickstarter for anyone and everyone to pledge and receive their copy in the future. Awkward Guests is not impossible to find or the most expensive game out there, but it isn't easy to track down either. Last I checked, it was being artificially inflated a little bit, and also only available from one, at least reputable source. So if you're just trying to get your hands on either of them, Scandal O may be the way to go just to get a copy of this amazing game. I'm going to explain how this game plays a little, give you a good idea, but I'm not going to do a full rules teach. If you're curious how it plays in depth, I encourage you to check out Monique and Naveen's channel, which is Before You Play, and they did a full rules teach and example on their channel, which was exemplary. Definitely check that out if you're curious. In Scandal O, you have a web in front of you. You have celebrities that are connected to certain contacts. You have newspapers that are wanting to publish certain stories. You have locations that have different people at them and items at them that are all intertwined, basically giving you a giant spider web. And it's your job to utilize the cards to cross off or check off information so you know what this person, this celebrity, has access to in their web. For example, someone may not want to talk to Ike. So if they don't want to talk to Ike, no information is passing through from Leslie to Ike, for example. If Leslie has something that Ike needs, it's a no-go. Leslie doesn't want to talk to Ike. There's also certain contacts that won't report to certain newspapers, or certain newspapers that don't want to report on certain scandals. It's a giant, twisted, and tangled web that honestly is daunting and a little confusing at the start. I had the same reaction with Awkward Guests, but I will say that of the two, Scandal O is more elaborate and more just confusing. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because you will discover it, you will figure it out, and you will get to the meat of the game. But on paper, Awkward Guests is a little more simple to understand, both the iconography, and I think it has a little slightly less going on than Scandal O does. I'm not mad about that. I'm not opposed about that. I think Scandal O does what it does extremely well. It just scared me a little bit when I was looking at that sheet trying to track all the information I was being given. After a few minutes, after a couple of plays, I warmed right up to it and I was ready to go. And this provided just the same amazing experience of deduction that Awkward Guests has. If you have not played Awkward Guests or can't find a copy, can't track it down, I sincerely encourage you to check out one or the other. Scandal O is likely going to be the easier to get a hold of. Maybe there's going to be some stretch goals. I don't know what their Kickstarter has planned. I am very happy having played Scandal O. They did a good job of changing the formula just enough that it was a little more intriguing, a little more compelling, and a little more difficult without making it something that it's not. This is still Awkward Guests' formula. It adds a little bit of flair to it, a little bit more complexity to it that makes it its own game, but overall, if you're excited about Awkward Guests, you should be excited about Scandal O. Scandal O launches on Kickstarter September 14th, which is this coming Tuesday. They turned it up to 11 and it works. It's still the same formula. It's still just as fun. It's still that pure deduction bliss that I get from playing these games, and I'll recommend either of them to anyone.